this is not the first time under Trump's administration. See, Trump is a millionaire. I'm sure he likes to think of himself as a billionaire. He doesn't have a problem with the government shutting down. He doesn't have a problem with people that need to survive, need to support their families. He doesn't have that issue. Most of the people that work under the Trump administration, they don't have that issue. Most of the people that work in Congress, they're rich. They have money, guaranteed jobs. They don't have to worry about a government shutdown. We have to worry about government shutdown. We the people, where it seems to be less of we the people and more of a clique. They control everything. And again, it's because no one teaches the locals to vote for your local politicians. If you want the Democrats to win the White House, you have to get local Democrats into office. It's not one person, it's many. And because we focused on one person, we lost the many. And the Republicans control the White House. So, it's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be looking for help. It's going to need money. And the only thing we can do is hold on until we're able to get people in office again. It's going to be a crazy situation that we're dealing with. Now, I was looking at this political story. They're talking about the government shutdown and a guide to what's still open, what's closed, and what's fuzzy. I'm trying to see if I can get it to read out loud so that you don't have to read. You can just sit back and listen to what's going on and hopefully find some comfort, some help in this story. Here we go.
Much of the federal bureaucracy is now officially dark. The government shutdown that began Wednesday is set to furlough food inspectors, park rangers, and millions of other federal workers in Washington and across the nation. Some are only heading to their offices for a few hours to undertake orderly shutdown activities. The federal courts and some government agencies like the IRS have enough money to run with for a short time, burning through their reserves of taxpayer funds until the hourglass drains their cash completely. But others have already shuttered for everyone not deemed essential by their agencies. While Social Security checks, mail, student loan bills, and funds for Ukraine will still be delivered, millions of workers are set to suffer financial hardship, at least among those who still have jobs after months of deep staffing cuts and a deferred resignation program. Advertisement. And then there's Donald Trump. The president presided over the nation's longest government shutdown during his first term, and it didn't turn out to be an obstacle to him returning to the White House. A shutdown now presents him and his budget chief, Russ Vought, ever eager to test the limits of executive authority, with a fresh means of wielding even more control over the federal workforce and spending. Last week, the Office of Management and Budget directed agencies to develop plans for firing employees if a shutdown happened. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Federal workers traditionally get back pay when shutdowns end, but contractors and others whose businesses depend on the federal government won't. Overall, the economic consequences of a shutdown will rest on how long the standoff lasts. Advertisement. Here's how the shutdown is initially hitting federal agencies, the services American taxpayers have come to expect, and other government functions. Travel. If you're making plans to visit the magnificent national parks, you're good to get in. Just don't expect to see many, if any, staff clearing trails or cleaning toilets. The Interior Department, which oversees the National Park Service, is keeping park roads, lookouts, trails, and open-air memorials open during the shutdown, according to the agency's latest contingency plan. But it's also furloughing 64% of NPS staff while the funding impasse persists. The agency is maintaining some law enforcement, fire suppression, emergency response, and power maintenance operations at most of the country's 400-plus national parks, while warning that only basic or no visitor services are running. Advertisement. Trump did the same thing when the government shut down during his first administration, a move that resulted in park visitors cutting down Joshua trees, and that several former park superintendents hoped he wouldn't do this time around. Now, the agency's contingency plan warns that a park may close if things get out of control, if visitor access becomes a safety, health, or resource protection issue. The area must be closed. More in U.S. Hundreds of feet of coastal bluff in California fell toward the ocean in landslide-stricken town. Associated Press. 76. Big Ball skips embarrassing detail in carjacking saga. The Daily Beast. 301. Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson escape to Nantucket for getaway weekend.
That's just some of the stories. It went off to the offside, but that's some of the things that stand open during the government shutdown. Like I say, it's a terrible situation.
And fly to a national park. Take a deep breath. The FAA is by far the transportation department's largest division, and on a normal day houses more than 80% of the agency's employees. A quarter of them are expected to be furloughed. According to a plan released Tuesday, around 33,500 FAA employees will stay on the job during a shutdown because their work is necessary to protect life and property, have salaries paid from accounts not funded with appropriations, or that are otherwise needed to comply with the law. Advertisement. The academy that trains new air traffic controllers continues, as does much needed hiring and field training. But air traffic controllers are working without pay through the shutdown since they're deemed essential workers. The same goes for TSA's baggage screeners. Student loans. Yes, student loan bills are still going to go out even with the government shutdown. The Education Department's contingency plan confirms that borrowers will still be required to make their payments. The department will also continue to disperse federal direct loans, the Pell Grant, and process the federal student aid form. The free application for federal student aid launched a week early, ahead of the October 1st launch date. Defense. More than 1 million people serving in the U.S. military are now working without pay. Advertisement. The Pentagon also can award new contracts or start new programs. And while commissaries overseas will stay open, they and other services on bases in the U.S. close or are operating on a limited basis. Elective surgeries and procedures in military medical and dental facilities get postponed. It's possible that lawmakers pass legislation to ensure active duty troops and Pentagon employees continue to get paid during the shutdown. But troops will miss a paycheck if the shutdown isn't resolved before October 15th. Thousands of other employees face furloughs, although many civilian defense workers are considered essential and will stay on the job. About 350,000 DoD civilian workers were furloughed during the 16-day 2013 government shutdown, the last standoff to hit the Pentagon. But most returned to work within a week as their work was declared essential. One area not being interrupted is Operation Atlantic Resolve, the massive military operation that conducts exercises in Europe and supports the movement of equipment into Ukraine. Taxes. The IRS is keeping all of its employees on the job, at least for now. Advertisement. A shutdown plan released Monday said the IRS would be able to use special funding that Democrats enacted in 2022 to avoid furloughing any of its almost 75,000 employees for the first 5 business days after a funding lapse. What happens if a shutdown stretches beyond that isn't clear yet. But the administration has good reason to keep at least some parts of the IRS well-staffed. The agency is in the midst of implementing tax provisions from the new GOP domestic policy law, such as tax deductions for tips and overtime pay, that it's hoping will give Republicans a boost in the midterms. Among other key tasks, The IRS needs to incorporate changes from that package into tax forms for next year's filing season. Advertisement. The good news for the IRS: this shutdown isn't happening during the tax filing season, which would potentially impact millions of returns and refunds. Healthcare. Federal employees supporting Medicare, Medicaid, and other mandatory health payments keep working unabated. So will HHS employees who respond to public health and natural emergencies. But overall, the Department of Health and Human Services is furloughing some 40% of its employees just a few months after weathering particularly deep staffing cuts under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The National Institutes of Health, the planet's biggest public funder of biomedical research, is furloughing 3/4 of its staff. Advertisement. Clinical trials are still on, but basic research conducted by NIH scientists, some veterinary services, and scientific equipment services cease. Remaining staff include those needed to care for clinical center patients and protect experiments. Roughly 2/3 of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention staff are being furloughed. Coordination with state and local health departments on opioid overdose prevention, HIV prevention, and diabetes prevention has ceased, according to the agency's plans. And while staff can continue to gather data about rates of infectious diseases, analysis of that information is on hold. But much of the Food and Drug Administration staff, 86% of agency employees, continue to report to work, including those managing recalls. Kennedy, who has said he wants to shrink the CDC, may also use the standoff in Congress to permanently boot employees that don't go along with the Trump administration's directives. Advertisement. The agency is in trouble, and we need to fix it, and we are fixing it. And it may be that some people should not be working there anymore, said Kennedy on Fox News, Fox and Friends in late August. Veterans Affairs. The Department of Veteran Affairs is not being hit like many other agencies due to appropriations already awarded by Congress. Benefits checks will continue to be processed, and medical appointments at VA health centers won't be interrupted. But officials are shuttering several support phone services, including the GI Bill hotline, until the funding impasse is resolved. Regional VA benefits offices will be closed, and public affairs outreach efforts will end. Career counseling and transition assistance programs are also halted. Burials will continue at veterans' cemeteries, but department workers will not permanently place headstones or maintain the grounds at those sites. Energy. Trump has made fossil fuel production a top priority of his administration, and he is not letting a government shutdown stop that. While the Interior Department is slashing 2/3 of the staff from the National Park Service and the Secretary's office, workers tasked with processing oil and natural gas drilling permits and coal mining operations are still going to work. The Bureau of Land Management, which oversees millions of acres of federal land, has designated those employees as essential, according to 2 people familiar with the plan. This includes anyone processing applications for permits to drill, rights of way for fossil fuel projects, and working on critical minerals or coal issues, the people said, who were granted anonymity because they were not authorized to talk to the media. Leadership says those programs are accepted from shutdown furloughs, and the staff is expected to work on those priorities, one of the people said. The shutdown also pauses most enforcement inspections and regulatory work conducted by EPA, slowing the Trump administration's efforts to repeal a suite of climate rules. New air and water permitting gets waylaid as well, which, if the shutdown continues for a significant period, could hit companies looking to expand their facilities. Even EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin seemed wary of culling too much more of the agency's workforce, resisting pressure last week from a conservative podcast host encouraging him to use the shutdown to make even deeper staffing cuts. Trump's trade mission. Many of the agencies responsible for assisting Trump with trade and tariff negotiations are being insulated from this latest funding lapse. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative released its planning document Tuesday afternoon showing the agency isn't furloughing any of its 237 full-time employees for now. The agency says it is tapping funds that aren't released over the weekend. The Commerce Department, an agency key to promoting U.S. exports and enforcing trade policy, is retaining about 20% of its staff, with furloughs affecting a range of sectors including weather, climate, and law enforcement programs. Even the more obscure Bureau of Industry and Security is retaining 336 of its 445 employees, which suggests oversight of export controls and a dozen active investigations that could lead to sector-specific tariffs are humming along. Food. Agriculture Department food safety inspectors, stationed at the nation's meat and poultry slaughterhouses, will remain on the job without a paycheck. The FDA, which oversees approximately 80% of the U.S. food supply, will have to triage its preventative food safety work. During the 2018-19 shutdown, the FDA could respond to foodborne outbreaks, but had to delay proactive inspections. A shutdown results in a ripple throughout the food system, ranging from inspections, food testing, interactions with other regulators, and the necessary interactions and consultation with the food industry at large, warned former FDA Deputy Commissioner Frankianas. A key food assistance program is also set to run out within days. The Special Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as WIC, supplies access to fruits and vegetables, infant formula, and breastfeeding assistance for nearly 7 million low-income pregnant and postpartum recipients. But a $150 million contingency fund for it is only expected to last a week in the event of a shutdown, according to the National WIC Association, a group representing public nutrition service agencies. Even though some states are expected to tap their own accounts to shore up the program, many will be forced to turn participants away. Tax battles. Federal Trade Commission, the agency at the center of a handful of big cases against tech giants, plans to furlough all but the commissioners and a small group of essential staff, according to the agency's latest contingency plan. In the past, the agency has allotted enough funding to continue operating for up to 3 weeks in the event of a government shutdown. But an FTC spokesperson declined to comment on whether the agency had a similar runway this year. Lawyers in active litigation, such as the agency's antitrust case against Amazon and lawsuit against Ticketmaster, will need to request suspensions of dates for hearings and filings. That means that the number of staff furloughed during the shutdown will depend on how many of the pending cases are granted delays. The agency's Consumer Response Center, which handles thousands of public complaints and inquiries a week, is also suspending its operations. Wall Street watchdogs. Financial markets may not be affected by the shutdown, but some of Wall Street regulators are now at a near standstill, with rulemaking and most enforcement work on hiatus. Corporate America has been eagerly waiting for work to gear up at both the Securities and Exchange Commission and Commodity Futures Trading Commission under Trump, the agencies in charge of overseeing stock, futures, and some cryptocurrency trading. Now, the agencies are operating with skeleton crews. Only 393 of the SEC's roughly 4,300 employees, 9% of the staff, keep coming to work during a shutdown, according to its latest contingency plan. The CFTC, meanwhile, is keeping just under 6% of its staff during the shutdown. In its contingency plan, the derivatives regulator said it will severely curtail its operations and expects that the vast majority of the agency's operations will cease. National...
All right, that's long enough. That's a long read, but essentially that's what Political has on their page for some of the government shutdown, some of the things that will stay open, some of the things that's a little fuzzy about whether it will stay open, and some of the things that are closing. Of course, this will affect a lot of people. It won't affect anyone in Congress, either side, but it will affect a lot of people. As you can see, it said that it will affect the WIC program with mothers, babies, newborns, milk and food. These people are playing and gambling with our lives. It's easy to gamble with people's lives when you continue to get paid. They have protocols so that they continue to get their money. So Congress could take all the time they want. It's like going on strike, but you continue getting paid. will it end? All right, I've took up enough of your time. It's been lunchtime, and I hope you have a great day. If you're working for the government, you're probably not having a great day, but all we can do is hold on, and hopefully these grown folks that's running the government can make some decisions. Until next time.